Welcome to our series, The Future of. This week, our topic of discussion is the future of agriculture. In this session, we explore how Rhode Island is working to build a more resilient food supply system through innovative agricultural practices, emerging technologies, and a future-minded workforce. If you happen to enjoy this session, let us know by giving us a thumbs up and make sure to subscribe to our channel to stay up to date when we release more content. Thank you for joining us.
My name's Tim Schartner, and I am part of the 7 boys of the 4th generation. I'm 3rd, and I am presently buying Schartner Farms. I'll be the steward going forward here until I pass it on. And we were looking to bring ourselves another 4 generations. And to do that, with encroaching development and the costs of land and the opportunities available to us, we were looking for something in agriculture that would compete with commercial development, and also was what we felt the future and kept the farm relevant. We found that in CEA, which is Controlled Environment Agriculture. Controlled Environment Agriculture, if you know it, it's a grass-covered field, the type we are buying. It's a Venlo system, has a growth management software. It's all controlled by computers, and it makes sure that every single day is July 27th. So, and no matter what time of year it is, we're using lights, we're using all these different methods to make sure that the plant says, oh, July 27th, let's procreate. And so we continue to harvest food. It does that through a lot of innovation. One of the things is it uses generators for the lights, and that generation produces, of course, emissions. Well, the emissions are scrubbed and cooled, and the CO2 then is emitted to the plants. The plants scrub the carbon and emit the oxygen. And all that soft tissue of, sorry, I didn't tell you, we're growing tomatoes. All that soft tissue, and it produces a ton of oxygen. So we have a negative carbon footprint. So it's really an incredible thing. Inside, you have bees, you have it's all non-GMO, organic growing, and it produces probably the 25 acres that we're doing will produce somewhere around 1,500 to 2,000 acres of field crop in comparison. Now, you think 25 acres is a big, it's not a big field, but it's a big greenhouse, right? And but we produce about 1.6% of what we consume in the state. Right, it's not a lot. We need to change that. We can change that through CEA.
My name is Dawn King. I am the Director of Undergraduate Studies for the Institute of Brown for Environment Society at Brown University. And as Julie mentioned, I teach our Urban Agriculture and Local Food System course. I've also formerly served as chair of the Rhode Island Food Policy Council. And I currently serve as chair of Red Tomato, which is a formerly Massachusetts company that just moved to Providence, which is amazing, that deals with medium-sized farms and wholesale in New England. And a lot of my research is really focused on ecosystem payments for agriculture. So I began with nutrient trading credits in the Chesapeake Bay area for runoff and water quality. I then looked into trading credits for oysters and aquaculture and water and filtering systems, and have recently looked into the potential of regenerative agriculture for carbon storage and climate change. So that's a little bit about me.
My name is Shannon Brawley. I'm the Executive Director of the Rhode Island Nursery and Landscape Association. My training is in landscape architecture, and actually I'm a geographer as well. My background is in community-based resource management and cultural preservation, and it really is. I graduated from UC Davis and came to Rhode Island, and I am working with the Nurserymen's Association right now, and we advocate on behalf again of the $2.5 billion industry in the state, and it's really a mixture of green engineers. RINLA represents, we're the umbrella, green engineers, landscape architects, to people who grow nursery stock, to people who grow, the trees and shrubs, to fruits and vegetables, all the way down to a landscape construction and fine gardening. It's really the people that it's that supply chain of production, of food production and nursery production and solid production to those that care for the land and care for our backyards. One of the biggest things facing our industry, we're in crisis. There is nobody to take on, to work in the industry. We have an aging demographic. Our farmers and our landscape companies are aging out. And so that threatens the very makeup of the land in the state of Rhode Island. It's a huge problem. And again, there's an increasing demand for our services, our products and services because of climate change and issues around food security. Our industry is actually the first responders. It's the people that will take the tree that falls off of your house when the wind comes or the electricity goes out. It's our people that are responding and helping you, helping you. We're also the people that are responding to flooding. And there's also this enormous lack of understanding of what the industry has to offer, the meaningful careers and their living wage careers. You can start off on a farm and you can end up with a landscape architecture degree. So there's really this wonderful pathway.
Juli, thank you for inviting me to be part of this panel. I'm Margaret DeVos. I'm with the Southside Community Land Trust, and we help people grow food for their families and for sale to their neighbors. We host a network of 55 community gardens and urban and rural farms, many of which are in South Providence. We also have farms and gardens in Pawtucket, Central Falls, Cranston, and Tiverton. And we know that when people have control of the assets of the food system, they make sure that people in their communities get fed. That's how it works. And we also promote sustainable agriculture by helping people practice it every day. We have 850 people who are growing food in the gardens and farms that we make available. And over 12,000 people each year are eating from these gardens and farms.
I want to just talk a little bit about some of the trends that each of you really mentioned that are happening in agriculture right now. We have urban agriculture, right? Urban farming. We've got regenerative or agroecology, CEA, indoor farming, right? So Tim, I want to come back to you. You talked a little bit about your farm and kind of why you're transitioning. On your website, you say that Rhode Island, you quote Ken Ayers, our chief of ag, which says, Rhode Island is posed to become the Netherlands of the Northeast. What do you mean by that? And what do you say to folks who are maybe kind of thinking, why would a farm that has such fertile soil need to want to convert land to a controlled environment ag hydroponic facility?
Wow, that's a great question. Of course, you had to direct it to me. I would tell you this. First of all, when Ken said that we're poised to be Netherlands in the Northeast, what he meant was we had the people, we had the land, we had the Bridgehampton soils, right? And the innovation set. Oh yeah. So we have the soils, we have the people, and we have the innovation center at URI, and I just was in a meeting with Brown, Roger Williams, Bryant, and CCRI regarding the same thing about, really starting to push agriculture as a, in its sector and in all the aspects of agriculture in Rhode Island. But I can tell you with CEA, understand that while we're growing hydroponically in that greenhouse, maybe 12 things you grow, cultivars you grow hydroponically. There's a ton of things you grow in the ground. So if you were to walk into the greenhouse, you'd notice that there's a beautiful field in front of you. If we put a ground cover on it while we're doing hydroponics, it's just for weed control. But we can switch and grow a lot of the crops in the ground in the CEA space, and of course we can do it year round. That is, that's the benefits of CEA. So I think that.
Can I just interject? So for those of us who maybe don't know like the price per acre, right? Or how much, it's difficult, right, to farm. I mentioned earlier the cost of land. So can you tell us like what are some other produce that you might grow on your farm compared to this hydroponic? Like what's the price differential
Okay, so
in the market? Like why would you want to grow tomatoes in hydroponics versus carrots in the ground?
well, I'll tell you why. Why I picked tomatoes, to be honest, is our partner who we're growing for, Paul Mastronardi. He is basically the leader. He has the most market share in tomatoes. The Boston, New York corridor, there's a huge market here for tomatoes. He's fulfilling, not as much as he'd like to in this market. So there was an opportunity for me to become a grower for him. And truthfully, tomatoes, honestly, give me the return to shorten my cash-on-cash return on the CapEx of the greenhouse. Now, could I go to peppers? Yes. Could I go to cukes? Yep. Strawberries are all hydroponic opportunities. Or I could go with Gerber daisies in the ground and some other products in the ground. And the Gerbers actually you can do quite well with. But we know tomatoes as a grower. It's something that we saw the opportunity on, and really we want to learn this space, learn their floor plan, learn how to operate. Despite that we've grown tomatoes for 40 years, this is a different environment. You're controlling it. There's a lot of different factors. So we thought that we would team up with the best. They are the best in the world, and so we thought that would lower opportunity costs.
Thank you. And we are starting to see in Rhode Island a few other kind of CEA, vertical farming, indoor farming examples that are different, right? Yours is hydroponic, but on soil. Gotham Greens is right here in Providence, right? And so that's a different model. Right. It's just a different kind of program. So speaking of food production, the 2018 Farm Bill established $10 million in competitive grant program to support research and development of urban and indoor farming. And in fact, already 15% of the world's food is grown in urban areas. So Margaret, tell us a little bit about how Southside Community Land Trust operates. You have a really fantastic kind of community model where you are kind of building this kind of next generation of workforce and ownership. Tell us about that model and what it means to community and food security.
We're not producers. We have a few farms where Southside Community Land Trust produces food. We produce food so that we can help demonstrate how to practice sustainable agriculture so that we can have a little bit of credibility when we're sharing practices with people. Like everybody, we're all dealing with the same climate conditions. We're dealing with the weather. We're dealing with the same pests. We have the same problems that all the growers on our land have, and that makes it even a stronger community ethic when we're trying to work with people. But about 30 farmers are farming from land that Southside owns and makes available. We typically lease land. It's a year-to-year lease for gardeners. It's about $25 for a plot. So anybody can get access to a plot. Even if you can't pay your plot fees, you can still garden in our community gardens. About 400 people are gardening in gardens that Southside Community Land Trust owns. People can grow whatever they want. The farmers make their own decisions about what they're going to grow and sell. The gardeners make their own decisions about what they're going to grow and eat and give to their families. And people are eating food year after year, meal after meal. It's a very, when I talk to people in the food security world, hunger, food insecurity, people are talking about federal nutrition benefits, the emergency food system. That's all very, very, very important safety net. But for people who are living and operating in low-income communities, we need to be, Southside Community Land Trust creates an alternative construct, an economy that folks, an agricultural economy that people can participate in, so that access to healthy, fresh, and food, affordable food, is exists, and that people aren't that the way we're interacting with low-income communities isn't just about emergency food. It's not just about emergency food. It's about building an economy that works for people. So that's what
There's more
Southside
ownership
Community
in
Land
that
Trust is
model,
doing.
perhaps. There's more ownership in that model, perhaps, and it's a little different from, Tim's family has had land for 4 or 5 generations, right? So your model, Southside Community Land Trust, provides land access for new and beginning farmers.
Right, and there are people who are growing on Southside land that are our 4th generations on that land. And that what you say about the price of land in Rhode Island it's been the highest cost in the country for over a decade. But even that said, we just bought a farm. We just bought we just put 5 farmers on a farm. So it's not insurmountable, but the practice of agriculture is it's complicated. And for the Southside Community Land Trust, Tim did a great job talking about how he makes his decisions about, I'm sure he said cash on cash return. That's what not all the farmers that we not all the people who deserve to have access to fresh, healthy, affordable food can have that kind of, which is everybody, right? Can have that kind of analysis happening, and so that they can create an economic model that works for them to continue to grow food, have access to land, have access to markets. And so Southside Community Land Trust is working with people so that we have farmers and gardeners who can produce food for their families and for their neighbors, because that's a model that works. And if it can be supported, people will grow food year after year after year after year and make it available.
Thank you. Yeah, so these are both kind of interesting examples, living examples of what the future of ag can continue to look like. So I want to move on to sustainability. Margaret, you talked about sustainability and climate change. Controlled environment ag arguably could be a response to climate change as well. So Dawn, tell us about, you mentioned ecosystem services, right? We're hearing terms like agroecology, regenerative agriculture, carbon farming. The Biden administration is talking about paying farmers to farm as a carbon sponge, right? The power of soil. What are we talking about? Like, is that part of our future? Is that a viable solution? What are your thoughts?
That's a great question. I think it's really the question of the year, right? Or the question of the decade is, can we use farming? Can we use how we, treat our livestock and our agriculture as an ecosystem service? And particularly people are really interested in, can we get paid for those services if we're storing things like carbon? And it's really interesting to look at, because right now agriculture is a problem when we're looking at greenhouse gases worldwide. And it's not necessarily practices like Schartner's farm, but worldwide what we're seeing is about 15% of our greenhouse gases are produced by agriculture, not the fossil fuel industry, but it really gets swept under the carpet many times. Because we need food to live. We don't necessarily need fossil fuels to live, but we absolutely need food to live. But farmers are really looking into this, and we're looking at this as maybe a carbon storage method. Now, I actually much prefer the term agroecology than regenerative agriculture, because the term agroecology has really been developed over decades with input from indigenous communities, from native communities, from many communities who have really used like ecosystem and ecosystem services, non-paid ecosystem services over the decades.
Can you give an example for those of us who don't really know what you mean by farms being ecosystem services and sequestering carbon? What does that mean? What are they regenerating?
Absolutely. So there are a couple things at play here. First of all, when you're talking about agroecosystems, for example. It's so much more than sequestering carbon. It's about providing pollinator habitat. It's about, migration habitat. It's planting cover crops and making sure that you're, giving nutrients to the soil, et cetera. With regenerative agriculture, oftentimes it's focused on, although honestly with regenerative agriculture, one of the reasons why I don't like to focus on it necessarily is because there's really no definition. There's a recent study where they surveyed farmers, and half of the farmers said it's really about process, about organic, it's about cover crops, it's about what you do to the land. The other half said it's about outcomes. It's about carbon storage. It's about, what the end result is. And neither is wrong, but there's really no definition of that. It's certainly metrics are very difficult with farmland. Weather can have an impact. It's really hard to measure, runoff and rain, and all of that can impact what you're actually storing in the ground. But in general, to answer your question, it's basic kind of like, fifth grade photosynthesis science, right? It's that plants take it. Tim alluded to this, right? They suck our carbon dioxide out of the atmosphere and they store it into the ground. But another problem with regenerative agriculture in the land regenerative agriculture is that once that soil is tilled, it kind of all goes back up into the air, right? So it doesn't stay there for eternity. And so that's kind of another issue with, especially with carbon storage, which plants have done that for free since plants have existed on Earth, right? So this is nothing new, this idea that plants store carbon. But there is a really interesting movement of, and especially with more technology, can we actually start monitoring through drones? Through remote sensing, the carbon storage and water storage and nitrogen and phosphorus, and if we have too much, and can we back up on that? So somewhat of what Tim's doing in a very controlled environment space, which is really cool for the future of agriculture. It's almost, how can we maybe do this outdoors? And I do warn, we're at least probably a decade out. But to really figure out, can this be done? Can we pay farmers for ecosystem services? And, the critique of regenerative agriculture. I mentioned that, when we're talking about agroecology, it's really rooted in a lot of history and a lot of cultures and how we take care of our land. And there's critique of regenerative agriculture, especially when, and it's something that I'm interested in. So it's not that I'm poo-pooing this, but this idea of paying for ecosystem services, especially for carbon storage. And the critique is that, if we're looking at equality and environmental justice, there is a capitalist world system that created these haves and have-nots. And if you look straight and say, the solution is that, there are white colonists that came in and they kicked out some folks, native populations that were using agroecology, and then we tilled the heck out of the soil for 100 years plus. Maybe the solution isn't to pay these same people for their services. And you see, a chart. If you look at land ownership since 1915, land that was owned by people of color, specifically Black farmers, has decreased by 97%. 97% of the land that was owned by Black farmers in 1915 is now gone. It's not theirs. And yet, if you look at white farmers since 1915, that number is only about a 2 to 3% loss. And so this becomes nationwide. And so this becomes, what is stayed in the hands of people of color versus white. And so it does become a question of equity and who you're keeping out of the equation. Many times with regenerative ag and these practices, it tends to be a very white movement in the United States right now. And I should point out that's very different than what Schartner Farms is doing, which is the controlled environment. And I would like to say, as somebody who's been involved with Food Solutions New England and is really interested in New England Feeding New England, if we want to, especially with climate change, something else we need to focus on is regional food security and these natural disasters and things that happen in shifting climate zones. And I've worked with students in the past, and if we wanted to get 50% of our own production in New England by the year 2050, which was really just a thought process, we would have to deforest 30% of forests in New England. Nobody really wants that either. And so it is really interesting to see indoor and controlled environment, very high yield agriculture in New England if we're concerned about the regional food system and the regional supply chain part of climate change.
Thank you for that overview. And I don't think we have time to talk about it today, but maybe for a future Venture Cafe, we could talk about the demand side and how our diets might need to shift right? And what kind of role startups and companies can play in helping us to have a more plant-based diet. The New England Food Vision talks about, I think, 3 different diets they lay out, right? And one is the omnivore's delight. And so, moving towards a more grain-based diet versus the diets that we have now, or it would be impossible, right, to supply that with agriculture in New England. Okay, so we've got a few minutes. I want to go back to you, Shannon. So we're thinking about the future. We're thinking about what will it take to build this equitable, sustainable food future. What can you tell us about Growing Futures RI? What kind of workforce will this take, and how are we currently today preparing for that future?
Listening to everyone, and really, I think that these practices, I really steer away from this idea of trend. There is a really important place for urban agriculture, controlled environmental ag, as well. And I think the most important piece is that we need to build that workforce so that we can respond. I mean, right now, like, we're helping Tim try and find that pipeline, and we're literally in crisis. Like, how are we going to train these individuals? What are the educational ecosystems? So RINLA is really looking at that whole system of training and education. As somebody, as a new person comes into Tim's place, how we developed a registered apprenticeship program for his business. So it clearly maps how someone, when they come in as an entry-level position, how they would grow. What are the skills? What are the certificates? What are the degree programs? Are the degree programs out there that support not only Tim, but other amazing business practitioners or young people understanding systems, understanding the value that that they need to understand that we're in relationship to this world around us, right? We're in relationship to growing and developing and growing a deeper understanding of soil, deeper understanding of how water falls in the environment, and how can we, and with that understanding, how can we manage that? How can we adapt to that? I think understanding biodiversity, health, and how that plays into our health and well-being as individuals. I think they need to understand policy and regulation, as well as business practices. How do we support, and also how do we support our labor force as a whole human being, supported so that they can grow to feed their families, grow to be happy human beings, stay here in Rhode Island.
Right, a more holistic perspective on that.
Right, and so that's Growing Futures. That's RINLA's mission. We are actively in the weeds right now doing that, working on many different fronts. I'm proud too, because it embraces all kinds of people. Everyone can play a role in this, and it's just getting our message and telling our story. The industry has never told the story well, and we're starting to do that through our videos, through getting people out there and telling the story. We're a stable community, also, a part of the workforce for controlled environmental, all kinds of folks with a place to everyone.
Thank you. What a vision for our future. Tim, speaking of the workforce that's being developed, can you just mention a few of the skills that you're looking for, right? You talk about upskilling and the need for a workforce to meet the demand of controlled environment ag. Talk us through, aside from the systems perspective, which is critical, the why, right, and the purpose. What are like the hard skills that are needed that are different from soil-based farming?
In the greenhouse, the harvesters will be trained on food handling, food security, but also on plant science, plant health. And they'll learn to understand invasive species and different things that are coming in, and also infestation and looking for whitefly and different things of that nature. So your harvester becomes your front line He has 15 rows that are that are theirs. And basically, we need to train them. So there's a continuing ed. We have a curriculum, and we have your certificates at the beginning, but then there's a continuing ed that is going to be accredited, and we've got 90% of it done. And then they will learn. They can get associate's degree in plant sciences and food handling. But this is, but we have to start with the basics. And sometimes we have to start with just literacy for some of my people. I mean, they're smart, they know how to grow, they're great growers, but to handle the fob and to handle the technology, we have to help them and invest in them. Just like, my great grandfather came here, he had one silver dollar, right? And he, 4 generations later, right? We got, a farm, and we have a lot of first generation people here, right? Needing the same type of help he got. So that's in it. I do want to say to the holistic side, when you're working hard in the greenhouse or in the field and you're working and you're toiling, it's different than what I do at the desk, and things matter. So when you're working for, enough tender to provide a home and a family for money, but you work for a sense of self-accomplishment and recognition from those you care about. Those 3 things are the tenets of purpose, and those really matter when you're in an environment that's hard work every day. And this is something that we've discussed making part of the training to reinforce people and to fortify people. So, and it helps with retention as well, right? And it helps with them reach goals that they didn't think they or wouldn't even imagine possible.
Brings me back full circle to what Margaret said earlier about community and purpose and food sovereignty. It's a different way of doing it, right? But valuing those for farmers, for future farmers. So we started a little late, but if I can just do one final question for each of you, okay? And Margaret, I'm going to start with you. So it's 2021. What a year it's been. Over the next 9 years, as we work towards the halfway goal set out in the New England Food Vision, so that would be 2030. So to remind everyone, the Food Vision calls for 50% of the food that we consume as New Englanders to be grown and produced here by 2060. So 2030 is 9 years away. It's not that far away. Let's help the audience. Imagine what's possible. So in a few short words, tell me what your vision is for our food future in 2030. Margaret.
Well, the first thing that I would say is we really need to look to people of color and people who are coming from diverse cultural communities for leadership and how to make transformative change. There is a huge shift in interest and demand from these communities for sustainable eating, for healthy lifestyles, perpetuating understandings of how to practice agriculture. And if we want to get to a place that's different in our agricultural practices, there's a lot of leadership there. So how Southside Community Land Trust would like to do that over the next 9 years is really connecting farmers and gardeners with land that they have agency over. We've done a lot of making land available with leases. We're looking for more models where we're really connecting farmers with their own farms. That takes, again, it's just money. It's nothing like the defense budget. We may have the most expensive land in the world, but it's not that expensive to put, 8 farmers on, on a farm. We do that all the time. So really connecting more people of color, more people from diverse cultural communities with with places to farm and having us all learned from that. That gets more people more access, and it's new practices, it's different practices, it's sustainable practices, and it's completely doable. And in the face of Shannon's comment about people aging out, about white farmers aging out, and not everybody has a sustainability plan like the Schartners. God bless that fourth generation. But
Thank you.
yep.
All right, Shannon, you're next. What's your vision for 2030? What's possible? So more young people going into green industry and thinking about food production as a viable
career. I think so, or at least an entryway into a career that holds so much meaning and actually will help build a more resilient community that can make the right decisions around climate change, that where we can adapt, where young people actually feel like they're actually doing something about it. You know, I feel as an adult, as an older person, that I have a responsibility in helping to guide young people into helping us care for where we live, helping us feed people, you know, and taking care of our forests. We're forgetting about all of the parks. We're forgetting about, you know, our urban settings and, our forests, all of those things that play an integral role, and our food system is a part of that larger environmental ecosystem. And we have a role to play in that.
We can do it, right?
And
9 years. Don, what do you think? 9 years, can we get close to the halfway mark of the New England food vision?
I think if we're going to get to the halfway mark of the New England food vision, we need to start thinking about food systems. I know this is the future agriculture panel, but it's so much more than agricultural production. It's agriculture distribution, it's processing facilities in the New England region. If we're really talking about food sovereignty, I think COVID-19 really brought this to light, but maybe not as much as it really should have been. Meat processing, meat packing, flash freezing for veggies, all of these things that could really give us a much more resilient food system is really lacking in New England, and it's lacking nationwide, not just in New England. So those support systems to also help our farmers that are producing this food to keep it locally, and also, you know, a shout out not just to the ground agriculture, but to aquaculture in New England. Julie had mentioned kind of the shifting diets with the food vision, and you know, one of those is not necessarily like veganism, but it's let's eat more shellfish, let's eat more seafood, let's eat more that is readily available in New England. And so there's also, I think, a lot of potential for kelp farming, for aquaculture, for bivalve mollusks, which, you know, our clam and our oyster friends, they actually are just as environmentally friendly as a vegan diet. And so I think there's going to be a lot of growth there as well.
And there's a great organization called Eating with the Ecosystem that does just that, right? Helps us shift our diets as the environment around us change. All right, Tim, take us home. Is it possible? What will it take? What's your vision?
Well, I guess it comes down to really the scope of what we want to, determine, right? What do we want to determine? For me, I think what I see myself doing in the next 9 years, and where I think Rhode Island and Ken Ayers wants to go, and I think where Shannon wants to go, and now that I've met my new friend from Brown, where she wants to go, I can tell you this. One, I think we'll be about 49%, 48% production of what we consume in Rhode Island through CEA and things like CEA. I think it's going to happen quickly. I think the culture is going to grow. I think the obligations of stewardship are going to also be addressed, and people are going to see how important it is to be a good land steward, all right, and to carbon load, right, to take, your greenhouse and take the organic materials off of it, and then you compost it, and then you trap the methane, you burn that in your generators, right, you scrub that and in the plants, emit it to your plants, and then you take out of your biodigester all that beautiful organic material and biochar, and you put it in your soils, and you load your soils. This is a simple process. No-till planting. We've done that for years, but it's not as popular as I think it should be, or as it should be. So I think that we're getting there. I think we're starting to see the importance of it, and I do believe that you know, at Schartner Farms we're going to practice those methods. We're going to also fortify the people that work in this industry and give them a better work environment, and we're going to fortify a better them, and that's my mission.
Great. Thanks, everyone. Thanks to the panel, big thinkers here. And each of you are really living examples of what's possible. So keep doing what you're doing.